But I do think what we're heading to is we're heading to this kind of these interconnected worlds, right? And I don't think it's one system. I don't think it's Roblox. I don't think it's Fortnite. I think it is literally a 3D internet's coming, right? To where.
What does that mean?
So.
What's going on, guys? Today we've got a great episode with John Linden, the CEO of Mythical Games. In this conversation, we talk about what's going on in the gaming world, why gaming is always at the tip of the innovation spear, how this is now infiltrated into the crypto world, and what it means in terms of being able to own your own assets, how these games are making money, and why they're getting so big. Why are 6.5 million people playing an NFL game? That type of stuff is going to change the way that people interact with these games. I really enjoyed talking to John. He is a wealth of knowledge. He's been in the industry for a long time, including working on things like Call of Duty and many other games that you've probably played. So here's my conversation with John Linden. So John, I thought a great place to start the conversation is games have always been fascinating to me. When I was a kid, I played a lot of games. I think a lot of people do that. Entertainment value is a huge driver of the economy, different activities people do. You have a very storied career in what I consider traditional games, not kind of crypto game stuff, but just traditional games. You worked on things like Call of Duty, etc. You were at Activision Blizzard for a while. Talk about what is the psychology as to why games somehow seem to be at the tip of the spear of innovation and they really drive so many of these behaviors. And I might even argue that something like a Bitcoin ends up being successful because people are replacing gaming with this new digital online currency in the early days or something.
Yeah, well, that's a big question there. Well, so I think, like I said, games have been, really, really fascinating to watch over the last, many decades, right? And I think there's been, now we have half the world's population are in games every month now, which is just absolutely amazing, And I think, the core of gaming is interesting because it's kind of a release, getting away from society to some degree, right? You can be in this other place. You can be with this somewhat anonymous group of people that you're able to interact with and really do what you want to do, right? So that's always been, it's also why things like Ready Player One, they're always this big dystopian worlds because people are trying to escape, and it is an escape from reality. So I think that's kind of the core piece we've seen with gaming. And from that though, what's been really fascinating has really been digital identity. I think digital identity, I've kind of told people before, one of my favorite stories is my kids now, their Spotify playlist is as important to them as our cassette tape or CD collection used to be, right? And it is part of their identity, and gaming really drives that. That's why you see so many Fortnite skins. Why also do people spend money on buying an old Fortnite account on eBay? It's a free account. Well, it's because I missed that one skin, and that skin means something to me. It has value to me as a consumer. So there's just a lot of that economy has kind of been built out from what is gaming, right? This escape from reality.
And people with the Spotify accounts, they don't want anyone to mess up their algorithm. They want the playlist to kind of go the way that they like it, or
well, it becomes who they are, right? Like I said, I remember we had cassette tapes and we'd show off our cassette tapes or CD collections to everybody, and that collection made us who we were. Now it's all done digitally, and they don't own anything. That's the amazing part with the Spotify playlist. It's just an algorithm, and I put my algorithm together, but it defines who I am. And I think that trend, the digital identity side, is really from gaming, really kind of goes through, what all these consumers want to see, really helps define who they are.
Now, in these games, how many games in the traditional world have items, products, et cetera, that could be transferred between them? So I'll give you, an example of Call of Duty and maybe Madden football. I don't think there's probably that many things that you're bringing between those two games in kind of the traditional world. Is that the norm, or is that an outlier example? But most of these games actually, that people do want to bring stuff between them.
Yeah, so I think it's not necessarily. There's this whole concept of interoperability. There's been this myth of kind of Web3 for a long time, and I think there's really a couple parts, right? One is, okay, cool, I actually have a football outfit or jerseys on or whatever, and I'm going to bring that into another game. I don't think that's as big of a reality as people really believe it to be.
People want that to be a big use case, but users aren't telling you that.
Yeah, it sounds great on paper, right? But I think there's a couple things with it. One, there's just a big production issue, right? Trying to get assets. I don't know a single creative director of a game that would be like, yeah, sure, just bring anything you want into my world, right? So there's already kind of this production issue, but I don't think it's really as much what people want either. I think what becomes interesting is when you can actually trade one asset for another asset, right? I've built value in one set of assets. could I express that value, somehow through another asset?
And like, give me an example. What in the traditional world? What would that?
Well, I'll use one of our games. So we have a game called NFL Rivals, and what's really interesting is it does have this Web3 economy behind it, and people can come in and you can put it on a credit card. And let's say I want a Patrick Mahomes, and he's $400. Sure, I could put it on my credit card. I could use crypto to buy Patrick Mahomes, but to the general consumer, the average consumer, most of them still are not going to put $400 on a credit card for a digital asset. So what we've done is we create a system called Quick Trade, and this is that step towards interoperability. I think this is interoperability within one game right now, but you can start seeing where it goes. So what I can do now is I can have Patrick Mahomes say, hey, I want to trade for that. I want that $400 of value. So I hit trade and it shows up on the left side. This is what I want. On the right side now, it takes all of my digital assets, and we have an order book now about 50,000 items deep, to where I can start selecting maybe items I don't want anymore. And as I select them, it's being priced in real time. So it's like, okay, cool. I'll select these 4 Green Bay Packers. Maybe I don't want anymore. And it's pricing them up. It's like, oh, $400. So now as a consumer, I can hit trade and I receive what I want and I got rid of what I don't want. And to me, that's the start of interoperability.
It's like bartering. It's like digital bartering.
It is. But what we actually did behind the scenes is we real time bought from one seller and we real time sold to 4 different buyers. So we ended up having a 6-party transaction in one atomic Web3 transaction. And to me, that's the power of Web3, right? Is we've now taken potentially 6 or 7 people around the world and transacted in a moment's notice. And to me, that's the start of interoperability, right? So you start off right now with NFL for NFL, but we have a new game FIFA coming out, or we have a Pudgy Penguin game coming out. What if I could eventually trade a Pudgy and this for Patrick Mahomes, right? So what if I could actually start trading across games? And to me, that's when digital assets become really powerful, because now you're able to use the value of them to get something else you might want.
And how about, let's say Patrick Mahomes, if he's able to like acquire better skills or have more points, or, whatever the different games are you able to actually go and acquire them with their enhancements? Or is it just like, hey, you start out square one like everybody else?
That's a great question. It really depends on the game designer. You have to be very careful, because sometimes that could be a pay to win. Sometimes that's actually encouraged, right? So it really depends on what the outcome of that game is. But we've seen it both ways. We've had it to where the stats transfer. We have our new FIFA game. Some of the stats won't transfer. You have to re-earn it yourself. But it really depends on the game. So I think you have to be very careful because you can kind of destroy the entire economy if you're not careful with that.
Yeah.
So
gaming definitely leads in innovation in many ways. What are some examples from history that you're aware of where games really kind of were the Trojan horse maybe for things to kind of become more mainstream?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of different things. I mean, I think if you think about just some of the depth of some of the games, right? These games that constantly had new forms of entertainment that was constantly evolving, right? And I think what we've seen that for decades now. And I think games like Call of Duty, you start off, hey, I have a one-time purchase, and then suddenly it's like, oh, there's a whole new set of content. A lot of times it's almost like a new game. So now I can just kind of extend that out. And I think you're seeing more of that. I think frankly, a lot of mainstream linear media, the way they distribute TV shows now can kind of be related to what we used to do in games. So we've seen a lot of that happen in terms of just how distribution works, how entertainment is basically delivered. I think gaming has led the way in a lot of that. I also think it's still the best value for the money, right? You think about it, you go to a movie one time with your family and you might spend $120, for a 2-hour movie. For 4 people. Gaming, you could play for hundreds and hundreds of hours on a $50, $60 purchase. And I think that's where some of those concepts of downloadable content, DLC or microtransactions came from. We've also seen the same thing with creator economy. And I think that's the other really interesting thing we've seen in gaming is that there is more, as soon as you have this user-generated content aspect, 2 things really happen. One, you start having more content than any one studio can make on their own. And I think that's a pretty interesting thing. Now, and then what that also does is not only do you have all this huge amount of content for your consumers now, but you also have stakeholders now. So now you have people that are wanting that game to win, right? Because they're helping create content for that ecosystem. So I think gaming's kind of led the way on how do you do that? How do you basically bring this creator economy together so that anybody can kind of contribute or anybody can eventually kind of monetize or make a living within these games?
Yeah. And when you see these games, there's a lot of different types of games. There's sports, there's shooting games, there's whatever. Is there a certain type that is being kind of more popular with the users who are more digital native or kind of into whether it's Bitcoin, digital assets, crypto, whatever?
So I think, honestly, it's funny. We've had that exercise, like, what game couldn't you make with this? And there's some. I think if you have a big cinematic linear story or even a branching story, that's a little harder to do. I think anything that has kind of a multiplayer aspect definitely works. So really,
what is most popular in your
most popular right now? I think for Web3, I think sports. I mean, I think we've picked some good. The reason we picked sports is just because the collector mentality is there, right? The competition, the multiplayer aspects. So I think sports is the biggest. I think RPG and so like a role playing game or a first person shooter are going to be big ones as well. There's been some people trying to do card games, which is another big genre of games. Normally, I think I think there's an entry. I don't know if the card games have been done quite well enough to kind of hit the true mainstream, but I think a TCG game or something like that would work as well.
Because what's interesting about when you talk about gaming, I think a lot of people think like, your kid or you when you were younger, sit down, maybe when you're still older, you sit down, you play video games, right?
Yeah.
But there's also things like Candy Crush and kind of mobile type games. There's obviously the Zyngas of the world, but you're also talking about things like solitaire or poker. I would even argue that some of the sports betting stuff is, that's borderline entertainment gaming.
It is. Yeah, it is.
You're getting in kind of this weird world.
Yeah.
So, are there areas that you see gaming hasn't pushed into yet? Or is it really just like, hey, this thing's infiltrated now?
No, I think we're heading that direction. I think, last year we had a couple games now start to hit millions of players for Web3. And that's a great start. But we see games that have billion players, in the non-Web3. So I think we still have a long way to go. I think this year we're going to see a couple games now hit tens of millions of players. And I think it's within a matter of a year or two that we'll start seeing.
FIFA and stuff.
We think FIFA, is going to be easily, 10 to 100 million players in that game. Same thing with the Pudgy game. I think we have a couple of them now. I think there's other games out there that we'll start seeing, 10 million plus. 10 million plus now starts getting into a pretty thriving economy. But I think we're not too far off to have 100 million or even a billion player game at some point.
And are people putting money into these? Like, when I used to play Madden with my brother, I beat him every time.
Yeah, of course you did. Of course you did.
21-0, game over.
Of course you did.
But we didn't put money in the game. Like we bought the game. Yeah. We bought the system, right? Obviously our parents had bought the TV and we plugged it all in or whatever. But there was never a point where we were even tempted. We were never even asked, hey, do you want to put more money into this game?
Yeah.
Probably would have been dangerous, right? If they did. But it seems like gaming now has really changed. There's, stores and you can buy things and it just feels like this is headed in a world where game producers have really figured out ways to better monetize the IP that they're creating.
Yeah, and again, I think it's new models that come out of that. So I think there's still a lot of hybrids out there, and which is great. Some and there's still some very dedicated gamers that are the same way. They're like, I'm going to put this money into the game and I'll never pay for it again. And there are games that do that. It's dwindling now, to be real honest, because I think what's happening now is that these games are kind of games as a service, right? They continue on. I think I read somewhere this is a non-Web3 game, but a game called No Man's Sky. I think they're on their 36th update over 9 years. And these are like beefy updates. This game has really morphed, 36 times over almost a decade. And I think that's entertaining to people. You put your time and effort behind, something you love. And the idea that content is constantly coming out is very appealing. And so I think we had to kind of move as an industry. We had to move from, hey, we can't sell you a game for $50 and you're still playing 9 years later, but we're still putting a lot of content out. It used to be you put out the game and we're done. We move on to the next game, right? But now it's these living, breathing economies and living, breathing worlds. So the models have kind of had to shift a little bit.
I remember talking to Matthew Ball, who was at Amazon Studios, I think, for a while.
Yep.
And he was pretty early to this idea of, he used the terminology metaverse, but I think that metaverse to him was different than what kind of other people were thinking about. Yeah. And he was thinking more of kind of these worlds where there was IP, that IP would show up in a game, it would show up in a movie, maybe it would become a TV series, there would be physical products, where, sell stuffed animals, like maybe an amusement park, like it was basically the melding of all of this together.
Yeah.
Disney probably is, one of, if not the best at doing this. Yeah. Do you see that happening with some of these games that are being built, whether you guys are building them or elsewhere, kind of in this new digital world?
Yeah, definitely. I think, kind of the whole world of transmedia, I think every game developer would love has this kind of transmedia property, right? Because it does give you opportunities. What I do think is interesting is generally like at the Activisions or whatever, you'd have to have a mass market before you could do a transmedia type play, right? You really had to build up these big franchises that everybody loves first. Then you could think about some of the other pieces out there. And I do think this whole concept of Web3 is starting to shift that a little bit. There are more opportunities to kind of, hey, bring this in. Hey, I have access here. And that is the power, I think, of Web3, right? Is I have kind of ownership over this asset, therefore I can get access to the other pieces. So I think we're starting to see more of that happen. Again, the whole metaverse thing is a whole other topic for sure. But I do think what we're heading to is this kind of these interconnected worlds, right? And I don't think it's one system. I don't think it's Roblox. I don't think it's Fortnite. I think it is literally a 3D internet's coming, right? To where,
what does that mean?
So we've been looking a lot into things like cloud gaming, right? And you think about cloud gaming, it's one of the biggest missing links in entertainment right now. So if you think about it, if I want music right now, it's on demand. I want a movie right now, you can get it on demand. I want a video game, I need to go download 80 gigabytes to my hard drive, hope I have enough space, and every time I turn it on, there's another 2 gig update. And the reason for that is that it's just how the tech is done, right? To where you can do cloud gaming right now, but you have to have a dedicated GPU in the cloud for every single player. You can't co-share a graphics, a GPU. And so what that basically means, if I want 1 million people in my world right now, I need 1 million GPUs in the cloud. Well, they're also used for things like, crypto mining. They're used for AI, right? So there's an issue there, right? There's a cost issue. It's doable right now, but I think GPUs run about $2.50 per hour. So it'd just be a very, very expensive proposition. What I think we're going to see now, and we have a company we acquired called Polystream, and what they've done is they've kind of shifted the tech into more of a CPU model, so we can start doing this at scale. And as you do it at scale, you can start having, entertainment on demand and gaming. And I think once you have entertainment on demand and gaming, you can start jumping between worlds, right? And we even have a prototype called Portals that we've shown to where I can literally be in one video game, open up a portal inside that game to somebody else's game and walk through that portal and instantly be in the other world. So I do think this concept of metaverse is coming. Web3 is really the piece that binds that all together, though. When your identity and your commerce and everything about you can move from world to world, now you have a 3D internet.
Why would you want to open one of those portals and kind of walk through into somebody else's world? Like what would be a use case?
That's great. So one we were talking about. So imagine like a GTA, right? So GTA 6 is going to be coming out hopefully in the next 12 months. We'll see. And in that game is this big city, and I could literally walk up. Let's say I walked up to an arcade machine. Well, it'd be pretty interesting to be able to be like, hey, I want to play an arcade game. And I can literally jump into that world and play somebody else's piece within another property. And I think there's a lot of things like that. You could almost think of almost like a digital mall or digital world over time, to where I don't have to have everybody building in my digital mall, but I have my storefront, and my storefront jumps into their world, right? So if you can have the ability to jump
technically like rent the storefront.
Exactly.
So I think true digital real estate, and you're driving users to the other platforms.
And if you could actually do that, so imagine like a Sega, right? All these companies have tremendous amounts of IP. And if I could actually if Sega could reuse their old IP in new digital storefronts, that becomes pretty interesting, right? So if you're asking Sega to recreate one of their IPs in your own digital mall, system, and there's a lot of work to redo that work, you're probably not going to get that world that work moved over. But if you could suddenly literally be like, hey, I already have this, you can move it into mine. It starts becoming this interconnected 3D system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating to think about just how much this is changing so quickly, but it also mirrors or recreates what the real world, kind of living is.
Yeah, no,
it blows my mind when you think of where you guys have built a lot of these products. Where did you start and where are you now? Is it the same place, or has it evolved over time? And how do you think about the tech stack? Today's episode is brought to you by Polkadot. Polkadot offers secure, scalable, and decentralized blockchain technology that perfectly aligns with the needs of innovative projects. It was developed by Gavin Wood, one of the co-founders of Ethereum and the creator of Solidity. Polkadot aims to build an internet where users have full control over their data and their applications. Polkadot offers tons of unique features, a shared security model, along with the new auction model and significant implementations like ASIC banking. Given these characteristics, it's easy to understand why Polkadot is gaining more and more traction in the cryptocurrency world. Some people even are talking about it as the AWS of Web3. Now, companies such as Mythical Games, Astor Network, and over 50 other independent blockchains with hundreds of applications already leverage Polkadot's technology to power their platforms. If you're looking for a reliable, scalable, and cutting-edge solution, Polkadot seems to be the top choice for industry players. Go check them out today at polkadot.com.
So we've been doing this since 2018. So we've been very early. We were probably arguably a little too early. It's been interesting. We were when we started off in 2018. What really brought me in the space from the traditional gaming space. So I just come off of 5 years of Call of Duty, had a mobile game company that we did a big Marvel game that had top 25 games. So we had a lot of success in the traditional games. And then I'd sold that company in 2018. And I was like, I started seeing this thing called CryptoKitties. And I was never really a whale in games. I'd spend 30 or 40 bucks. I never was one of those that spent thousands of dollars in a game. And the next thing I know, I dropped $600 on these 2D images of cats. And I'm like, what the hell just happened? That's not my psychology. It's not what my normal behaviors. And that's when it kind of hit me of what this could become, right? Because for me, the reason I kind of analyzed this, like, why did I do that? Because it wasn't entertainment anymore. It was an asset. I could decide if I gave it to you, if I sold it at a loss, I sold it at a profit, I destroyed it. It was my choice as a consumer what I did with that asset. That was the big aha moment, right? Back in 2017, 2018. And so we jumped into the space and we immediately saw this thing of like, okay, we want to bring this to the masses. We're not trying to sell $200,000 NFTs. We want to sell normal items. And then we had this problem of like, well, if I sell a $20 item and I'm paying $60 in Ethereum gas fees, that's a challenge, right? So we were the first ones to kind of jump on. We jumped on maybe a blast in the past, EOS back in the day, one of the first proof of stake. And that was our first take. And the reason we love proof of stake is the costs were just much less. It was something we could do to actually bring normal price assets to the consumer. So we went down that path for a little while.
And did you need it to be decentralized or not really?
That's a great question. I've gotten that a lot. We don't technically, I think you could pull off, look at Roblox. Roblox is basically a centralized Web3 application in a way, right? To me, there's a core difference though, right? If you really believe on where this goes, and if you really believe in the creator economy, I do think it has to be decentralized. I think it has to be open because again, no shade at a Roblox, but Roblox is controlled by shareholders and they could easily be like, you know what? We want to boost our earnings this quarter. So we're going to raise the price. Not that they would do that, but they could. They have the power to raise whatever, change payment terms. And I think if you truly want a creator economy that I think can reach $1 trillion industry, I think an open creator economy is $1 trillion industry. It has to be transparent. It has to be immutable, right? It has to have all these different properties that are native to Web3. So I really believe in what we're doing. Could we rebuild it all for one game? Sure. We could build it centralized for one game, and we've seen examples out there. But I think for a truly interconnected global economy, I think it has to be decentralized.
Yeah. Where are you guys building now?
So we are building on a Polkadot structure or on infrastructure right now. So we have our own chain that we helped get kind of set up through a foundation called the Mythos Foundation. It's us and actually about 22 other companies have joined Mythos recently. So big game developers. And we've been building this kind of decentralized gaming system, on top of the substrate, the Polkadot substrate ecosystem. And I've gotten the question a lot, why, And I think to me, there's been two really important things. One, our chain now is actually has more NFT transactions than the other top 9. I think we're second only to Ethereum in sales now, mainnet Ethereum. So we have more daily sales volume than Solana, more daily sales volume than Polygon or Immutable or anybody else base out there right now. In terms of transaction volume, if you take our transactions that we do on a monthly basis and you combine the other 9 top chains combined, we're doing more transaction volume. So we can push volume. We know how to push volume because it's gamers. The reason we kind of chose the Polkadot infrastructure was really 2 things. One, we could have our own chain tech that's really made for gaming. So the Mythos chain is it's not made to do a lot else besides we're really focused on gaming and entertainment. And we can have our own tech and our own DAO that manages that. But we have the security of Polkadot, which is actually really good. I don't think there's ever been a case that Polkadot's been, kind of hacked. It's never really gone down. It just goes. So I think the tech out there is super powerful. And when we're connecting consumers with fiat systems or with Apple and Google or systems like that, having that reliability and having that stability and growth is really, really important.
Yeah. I actually don't know the answer to this, but I think if we had a live audience here of many people in our audience, somebody would raise their hand and be like, well, can you just do this on top of Bitcoin?
Yeah.
Right? Like Bitcoin's like the most decentralized, it's the first, it's the largest, like it has some advantages or many advantages to it. But you were talking about kind of the speed and performance and this, like talk about the difference there. And what's interesting to me is I remember when there was a big debate about decentralization of smart contracts, and the Bitcoiners were like, "Hey, we're going to bring it to Bitcoin." Other people are like, "We're going to do it elsewhere." And Binance Smart Chain came out, and a bunch of developers left Ethereum and went to Binance Smart Chain for like a couple weeks. And it was the first time I was like, "Oh, wait a minute! There's a bunch of applications where like actually decentralization doesn't matter at all. They just want cheap and fast." Right. And so, not to say that that's good or bad or whatever. It was just like very obvious that's what they were optimizing for. Versus, I think a lot of people who hold, let's say, Bitcoin, they're optimizing for security. But now people are trying to build on top of it. And so actually a lot of those people, they want the decentralization, but they also want speed and performance.
So it's like you want it all, right? You want it all.
It's interesting dynamic. And look, I am not by any means a technical expert or any of that stuff, but like watching the decision making of companies we've invested in and stuff, it's like people are trying to figure out like what is the right mix between I'm trying to build something that's got to be cheap and fast. But I do want, decentralization or security. It's like, talk a little bit about that.
I think you're exactly right. There was always the product triangle, right? You pick two of the three. Pick two. And I think there's a little of that. And I think, to be really open with you about like the polkadot ecosystem, I think it has the speed and it has the scale. If I put a third leg on that triangle with them, it's probably the ecosystem, and they're probably a little slower on the ecosystem right now. They have a lot of great, amazing projects, but it's not maybe quite as developed of the ecosystem as the other ones. And we chose scale and speed. And I think, but I think you're right. I'm hoping eventually all the chains get to all three, but I think we had to choose what we needed right now. I always love this as well, to where people. So when I was at Call of Duty. I want to say we did 1,800. No, wait, sorry. What was it? We did 2 million matches or 1.8 million matches a minute in Call of Duty, right? So if all we did with Call of Duty is record the instance of match started, we would take out every chain in the world, right? Combined probably right now. So gaming's on another level, right? And we don't do that. We don't record every match because it would take out most chains. So I think what we figured out is like, okay, let's record what we need. I'd love to have more data on chain, but I just don't think we can push it that hard yet. So we only record kind of the financial aspects that we need to protect it, that we want transparent, we want out there. So things like mints and transfers and quick trades and sales, and that's all we record on chain right now for our games. And I think as time develops and as tech develops over time, we'll be able to record a lot more out there. But yeah, we kind of chose for speed and scale and a little less on maybe the ecosystem development side.
What are people using as a currency inside of these games? When I first started paying attention to Bitcoin, it was like, obviously Bitcoin versus the dollar. It now seems like stable coins are driving the dollar higher in terms of adoption, and Bitcoin is winning. There's other assets that are, doing great and continue to grow. So how do you guys think about, kind of like not the asset in terms of the Patrick Mahomes or whatever, but actual like currency.
So we have, the Mythos chain uses the Mythos token. So the Myth token. It's a ERC20 token out there. What I love about where we're heading with this is we now have millions of transactions a month. And when we first set up that Mythos chain and we were proposing through the DAO, we kind of helped figure out the gas fee. And honestly, we didn't even burn the gas. We didn't know what to do with the gas fee. It's like, just hold it in an account. And we started running this, and like I said, we've now run 30 million transactions through this, and we set it painfully low. So basically the way we see it right now is consumers are coming in, they're using fiat, mostly fiat right now, to purchase the coin behind the scenes, and it actually transacts in Myth. So we were looking at the tokenomics of how does this play out, right? And I think my view, and maybe wrongly so, but my view, it's my fourth company, and I think in terms of fundamentals, and I'm like, how do we build something that's truly sustainable, consumer sustainable tokenomics that can really last forever, that also rewards people securing it, right? But is very easy to do for consumers. And so what we do right now is we just actually announced we're going to 7x the gas fee, because now we have 20 plus million transactions, and we can kind of see like, okay, we set it too low, and we're going to basically 7x that in the next couple of weeks here, and we are going to start burning that transaction fee. So basically the players now are using fiat and ramps to buy the token. What's also really interesting is only 24% of the people that buy, or 24% of the tokens they buy, have ever left the ecosystem. They just like gaming consumers are different than crypto traders, right? They buy and hold. They just buy and hold, and what you can see just the wallet stored value just keeps climbing every single month. The stored value climbs, and then from those balances, they're spending over and over and over to buy their assets, and then from that is the gas fees. So what we're doing now is with that burn already. This is pre-Pudgy coming out, pre-FIFA. We'll be burning about 1.5 million tokens a month, or about 18 million a year, on a fixed billion fixed supply. So we're already now going to be deflating the supply by 2% a year already. And then we've also set up now a staking reward. So people that want to hold the token, or gamers eventually, we're going to auto stake for them to where they're getting kind of this interest off of this. And we're setting that at kind of a 5%. We're already at a 2% deflation against that. I think with FIFA and Pudgy coming on board, those two games alone, we're going to be burning significantly more than even the staking rewards come out. So I think we'll have, by the end of this year, we'll have probably, I think it's maybe the first and only consumer sustainable tokenomics that is every year we'll end up with paying out of strong staking rewards. We'll still end up with a deflationary supply.
Could you do the payments with stablecoins, or do you feel like there's an advantage to having like the native token? Today's episode is brought to you by Reed Smith. The practice of law has the power to drive progress, to move businesses forward and support them in achieving their goals. By seizing opportunities and overcoming obstacles, Reed Smith is focused on outcomes. I personally use them as my law firm, and I think that they are fantastic. They know that your time is valuable and that your matters are important. Their deep industry knowledge, long-standing relationships, and collaborative structure make them the go-to partner for complex disputes, transactions, and regulatory matters. Reed Smith delivers purposeful, highly engaged client service that drives progress for your business. Go to reedsmith.com to learn more about the best lawyers in the game. reedsmith.com. Go check them out today.
Yeah, we like the native token. We could. In fact, we're going to be adding some stable coins. So people that maybe don't want a risk of holding a token, they can kind of convert into that. But the chain does basically all gas fees and everything runs through our own token. Through the foundation. So we like it because there's also more and more opportunities. And also, if you have a deflationary model over time, it's kind of a Bitcoin phenomenon, right? And I think the difference between what we're doing is we're not putting hash power against it. We're putting more and more and more consumers against it. And I think that's kind of the scarcity model, is people are going to keep buying. These consumers buy the token regardless of price. They don't care if it's 20 cents or $20 because they're trying to get $100 credit, $100 worth of credits essentially to buy Messi, to get Ronaldo, right? Something like that.
What do your former colleagues, kind of the ones who are left behind in the traditional gaming world, what do they think about all this?
It's really interesting. So I think at first they thought we were a little crazy, to be honest. Like, what, you're doing what, But I think what we're seeing now, so NFL has been a great case study for us. And I think FIFA is going to really shift the momentum for the traditional gaming companies. Before, they're like, okay, we get it. Same question you asked. Why does this need to be decentralized? We can do this centralized. But what we're seeing now is that those trade volumes, players are really loving it. So NFL, the first year, we just finished season 2 of NFL. So the first year of NFL, 80% of our revenue came from traditional gaming revenue. So 80% came from in-app purchases in the app stores and things like that. 20% of our revenue came from secondary trading fees. It's like, okay. And then the gaming is like, okay, 20%. This year, because of that quick trade and things like that I mentioned, 35% of our revenue came from primary. 65% of our revenue for NFL came from secondary. Now people are like, oh, over half of your revenue is now coming from this.
Because they don't have that.
They don't have any of that.
Yeah. So basically, they're looking at it and they're saying, wait a minute, I could essentially triple my revenue to a degree if I was able to create some sort of secondary market.
Exactly. So I think we are just now getting to point. You got to remember, game companies can be very skeptical. Mm-hmm. I remember a funny conversation with Bobby Kotick, to where he was talking to us about mobile, and we were like, "Can we get into mobile?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's only a $25 billion industry." And then the next year, it's like more games came out. We're like, "Can we please get into mobile?" And he's like, it's only a $70 billion industry, and it's growing. And then finally it's like, okay, we're going to buy King, So game companies can be a little slow because they're chasing a bunch of things, but they want to see big swings before they really dive in. And I don't think we had a game that had millions of people that are creating a big impact on revenue until now. So we're starting to see that shift, and you're starting to see a lot of people like, we need to be watching this. So I think we're going to be moving from watching the space to entering the space very, very rapidly.
And is it something where as they come in, all boats rise together, or is there a little bit of a zero sum? There's only so many gamers.
Yeah.
And so if they have good games, and that puts more pressure on you guys.
A little of both. A little of both. I think there's noise, but I think we have a lot of noise in Web3 right now too. There's a lot of people that want to jump in and it's like, what I want to do? I want to make a video game out of this blockchain tech. And it's like, that's hard. It's painful. Talk to anybody in the gaming industry for a long time, and it's a very stressful industry. It's very hard to get a game made. It's a harder one to even ship it, and it's really, really hard to have one that's sustained. Right? It's a high failure rate in traditional games. So I think people are coming in. There will be more noise, but I think overall, I do think I think everything will rise, because I think as you get more and more people out there, we're already figuring out ways now to be like, cool. Okay, Pingu has a token over here now, and we have a game over here, and we can use these, and then the Penguins themselves are on Ethereum. And I think we're starting to get to a point in the industry where we can kind of make all the different pieces work together. So I think as more content and more gamers come in, it's a positive, because we can make all types of new things work.
Yeah. Right? And when you think about who's building this stuff, are these young people who are kind of digital native into crypto and stuff, and they're the ones who are running towards this? Or is this a mix of also kind of legacy 30-year veteran gaming engineers?
I think there's I'd say there's two sides. I think Web3 gaming gets kind of lumped into one big pool. I think there's a couple really interesting things happening. One, there's younger developers that are building something completely different. And it's going to take a while, right? That's some of it's niche. Same thing in games. Indie game studios are, there's a lot of them, but indie game studios also have a tendency every now and then there'll be a breakout and it changes everything, right? So I'd say a lot of the shifts in gaming have come from the indies did it first, and then the bigger studios kind of took some of that learnings and they made it on a bigger percentage of the market. I think we're seeing the same thing in the Web3 gaming. I think you'll see some smaller groups that are testing the waters and doing stuff, and probably most of them will fail. But there'll be a couple pieces that are like, oh my God, that was cool. How do we do that again, right? So I think there's that portion of it. But I do think we're starting to see bigger developers come in, people that have been around for a long time, which is really important. You mentioned, I think before, like some of the games haven't been fun, right? Well, it takes a skill set, it takes experience, frankly, to get through that. Even then, you can fail pretty easily on a game. But having that experience and having that that skill set, you've already done it many times, definitely gives you an advantage for sure. So I think as we get more of these in there, and some of my favorite games that are coming out soon are from people that have been around in the industry for a long time.
What are like 2 or 3 predictions you have for this whole world, maybe over the next 12 to 24 months? On
the gaming side? So I think one prediction, I think we'll start seeing games, like I said, 10 million plus players, which is going to wake up the rest of the industry.
And that's pretty big, right?
It's big. And I mean, NFL, we've hit 6.5 million in our games already, but I think we're going to start seeing 25, 30, 40 million players. And I think that's going to wake up the industry. I think we're going to start seeing some new forms of social come out of this. And I think that's really interesting. So if you think of the gaming industry right now, a successful game is one thing, but once you have a successful game, this kind of fractured ecosystem starts developing around it. You have content on socials, you have esports over here, you have streaming on this platform, and it's pretty broken. And I think what we're going to see is Web3 will start kind of uniting some of those ecosystems together to where when you do have a single token or a single currency, or even more importantly, a currency that could easily be swapped instantly for another currency, now these ecosystems start playing nice together. So I think social is going to dominate kind of what happens next. Mm-hmm. We need great games first, but once we have that, things like community tournaments, things like, cross trading amongst games of tokens and assets. That's when we really start seeing some phenomenal growth of what happens. So I'd say those are probably my 2 biggest. And I think we'll see, like I said, we'll start seeing some real great games come from great developers.
Yeah. When you cross over 10, you get to 20, 30, 40 million. Is that like you've now penetrated, US schools and all the kids are talking about it and they're going home, running home and trying to play the games? Or is that still kind of more a niche compared to the legacy games?
That's a great question. I don't know the exact number on it. But I think,
like how many people play Call of Duty?
Call of Duty. I mean, it depends. So on the console side, probably about 50 million.
Okay.
Which is great.
Yeah.
On the mobile side, it's over 500 million. So,
wow.
yeah.
So it's that heavily skewed to mobile.
But most of the money's in the PC
Of course,
console,
of course.
right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, it's just the audience, right? You have this global, huge audience that can play that game.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think they've hit over 500 million installs now.
And how many? How much of the focus is on like US based console players versus mobile, international? Obviously, they have 500 million of them. That's a lot, but the monetization plays a big.
The monetization plays a key thing, and that's the other thing that I think this is where Web3 will make a massive permanent impact on gaming. The reason that frankly, Call of Duty Mobile is very fun. It's very accessible. It's but most of the money still comes from PC console. Okay, it's not mostly US. It's pretty worldwide, but it's a different player, right? Not everybody has a PC or has a console. What we're interested in, I'll even use FIFA. So EA, there's no FIFA mobile game anymore. There's now EAFC, which used to be EA FIFA. That game though had 500 million people a year play the mobile game, but it didn't monetize very well. So why didn't it monetize very well? Because a very heavy percentage of those players were in Argentina, Southeast Asia, Brazil, different parts of the world that it's very hard to get money out of them. Well, what I think is really exciting about what we've done with Quick Trade is I can now just play the game and I could earn something of value. And now when I go to trade that, I'm actually I'm actually trading with people around the world. So you're starting to mix the cohorts together. Some of them could be whales in the United States. Some of them could be speculators. Some of them be collectors. We don't care. The system doesn't care. It's just trying to find those trades in real time. Mm-hmm. And when we do that, we're generating transaction fees on everything. So even a player in Argentina now can make money for the developer without spending $1. So time now becomes
kind of crazy.
That's a permanent effect of gaming. Once we prove that out, I think every company in the world is going to be looking at it, because no one has really effectively figured out how do you monetize outside of ads. Ads have been one, and ads kind of wear on people, but ads have been really the only form of monetization outside of in-app purchases. And I think we have an opportunity to say, hey, trading actually also makes it work too, because you're converting their time into money for somebody else.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think about kind of the evolution there, right? You just keep inventing new ways to, hey, if you got eyeballs, there's a way to make a business. Yeah. What's the 60-second pitch on Mythical Games? Yeah,
so I think Mythical, like I said, we're really trying to build a new economy. We really want to basically give the power of ownership back to the players, give new forms of economy, whether it's player to player with a game, just give them new ways of how they can transact. So we've been working, like I said, to build that chain tech and what we call the Mythical platform. So basically it's the chain tech through the Mythos chain and the Myth token. It's the marketplace tech to do these kind of real-time crazy transactions that make gamers money. And then it's the games on top of that. So our mission is basically to build the best platform out there to really open up these economies for any game in the world.
And where can we send people to find you?
Where to find me? Yeah. I'm at John Was Taken on Twitter, or X. Sorry, I'm still getting used to that after years. Or at Play Mythical.
At John Was Taken.
At John Was Taken.
That's a great handle,
because John was taken.
Is that why you got it? That's incredible. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
This is super cool, and I think that games in general are something that is like very Lindy, right? Games are not going away. People want to be entertained, and new form factors, new technologies are always interesting to learn about. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.